ladies. It's me, Dr. Maiysha, and we are doing our second training since the inception of the group, and that is the process of change. So I've been talking about the process of change in context of career transition, and last week we did clarity, contemplation, and the process of change. And to summarize, the basic principle of what I talked about in this is that there are the 6 stages of change, which you all might already be familiar with, or probably already familiar with: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, and then maintenance, and then there's the termination phase. So we're going through these stages of change and why they're so important and how they're so critical in the process of transitioning a career. And so last week we talked about contemplation and how it's important once you come to this place of awareness that something needs to change. I see people popping on, so when you pop on, and I'm just recapping the last training, and we'll get into it in just a minute, but as you pop on, announce yourself, pop into the comments, say hi, and if you have any questions along the way, go ahead and ask those questions as well. I want, any questions that you have. I want full participation, and if you're in the replay, if you're checking the replay, if you're going to watch the replay, same thing. Ask your questions along the way. I will be monitoring the comments even after the training is done, so that your questions can be answered. So, as I was saying last week, we did. Hi, Melissa. How are you? We talked about the contemplation phase and how the most important thing, the most important foundation is really knowing what you want and getting clarity. And when you come to this awareness of something's got to change, the first thing there is to do is to really start to look at, well, what is it that I want? What is it that has not been working? What is it that is missing from my current circumstance or situation? And what do I really want? Because we've been conditioned to take what looks good. We've been conditioned to sort of put ourselves on the back burner, or what we want on the back burner, excuse me. And we have not been really truly asked throughout our career what it is that we want for our lives. So that is sort of the summary of what we talked about in the contemplation, clarity, and the process of change, leading us into the next stage of change, which is preparation. Now, I want to break down one of the biggest mistakes that I think we as physicians, and I think any high performance professional tends to do when we are embarking upon something new in our lives. We think about it, we become aware of it, the pressure builds and rises, we think about it, and then we say, what? That's it. It's time to go. And we jump. We look for other things, we jump right into action. But the biggest mistake, why that's one of the biggest mistakes that we make, is because we fail to prepare. And so we fail to plan. So when you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And this preparation, it may seem like, looking for another job is preparing, or seeking out and research is preparing. That's only a part of preparation. There are many different ways and many different levels of preparation, and that will set you up for success. So that's why this stage is such an important stage to allow yourself to go into and exist, and to understand the different intricacies and the different levels of preparation is also important, because sometimes we think preparation is research. But what that's sort of the beginning of preparation, and that we can get ourselves stuck in the analysis paralysis because we are preparing for our next move. When in fact, some of that research and that analysis paralysis actually indicates that we're still not clear about what we want and about what there is. So the preparation phase entails the deepening of the clarity. So, in the last training, we talked about what is the ideal career, like really looking at logistically, what is the ideal career. And once you get that big picture, once you kind of get a feel for what you want, then as you start to prepare, you use that ideal as a working document. And you look at, well, what are all of the different ways that I could potentially get there? And that helps you to start to create the pathway, which is in preparation for the action. You want to have the strategy or the pathway in place before you take the action. Because when you have the strategy in place, then you're setting yourself up for, not only setting yourself up for success, but you're also setting yourself up for a road that is very workable. So the strategies and the structures are part of the preparation process, and they're very critical parts of the preparation process. The research of all of the ways, all the possible ways that you can fulfill up on getting from where you are to where you want to be is very important. But having the strategy in place first and then putting the structure in place is critical. So then how do you begin to create a strategy? Well, so first of all, when you're very clear about what you want, then you look at sort of what are the markers, what are the things that need to be done in the process. And sometimes, you will know what that is, and sometimes that's some of the stuff that's outside your view. So then, we have these blind spots, right? We're looking here and our blind spots are back here. So then when we turn, we're never gonna really see those blind spots. So we may not see all of the various components of the strategy to put in place because we are still the fish in water and we're still trying to get away from something. Now, one of the things that I think I might have mentioned in the last one is that as you're preparing the strategy, as you're looking at what you want to make sure that you're focusing on the prize, not focusing on getting away from something, because the more you focus on what you're running away from, the more you're going to produce more of that, if that makes sense. So as you're preparing the strategy, you look at, okay, here's where I want to be, here's where I am, what are the steps that need to happen, and what is the most important first step that needs to happen. And sometimes the most important first step is to create immediate workability. So for some, that means in the household, giving yourself space, setting some boundaries so that you actually have the clarity to think about what the next step is. And for some of you, it may mean looking for some type of bridge job. If you're in a completely toxic and over-demanding, overbearing circumstance, it may be starting to look for a bridge career home so that you have, again, the space and the time to plan for that next step. For some of you, it may be looking at what is in your existing job or career can you do to give yourself some space? What can you ask for from your leadership or from your superior managers, rather, in order to be able to get more space to think about the planning. So there is the strategy and there's the sort of initial, what I call triage in first aid. And that might be the first step on the strategy, getting your house in order. Sometimes the first step in strategy is asking for help. And here's another really grave mistake that I think we as physicians, and especially as women physicians, make when we're taking an action in our lives, whether it be towards transitioning our careers or just getting our house in order. We are conditioned to do it all by ourselves. Like we're these, for God's sake, we are highly educated, highly capable, highly skilled and talented women doctors. We should be able to figure it out, right? Yeah, well, it's not that simple. There are a lot of things we could figure out, but what's the cost? What's the cost of trying to take it on all by yourself when you don't have to, when you can have support, when you can have mentors, when you, excuse me, when you can have community around you. That is why I started this group, to create a community to bounce ideas off, for me to be able to offer training and to be a resource for you. So one of the big grave mistakes that is made in this preparation process is trying to do it in a vacuum. When you're doing it in a vacuum, you can't possibly you can't possibly know all the little steps and details and things to take. There's always going to be a missing. And so, you know, to be able to bounce these ideas off of someone whom you trust, who has the experience that you're in the area, in the realm of which you're moving, and who has your best interest at heart, though that's how you choose someone to work with. Okay, and it could be a colleague, it could be, you know, a spouse, it could be a coach, it could be a friend, it could be whatever. It just needs to be someone who has an expertise in what you're trying to do, who you trust, and who has your best interest in heart. And it's not going to be putting all of what they think you should be doing and not allowing space for what you feel you should be doing. Okay. And someone who will also hold you accountable and call you on your stuff. That's another person. So in that preparation. So then you have so let's say now you have the strategy. You're putting in place these various steps, goalposts along the way. And as you put these strategies in place, you identify the resources that will help you achieve the goals along the way. All right, this is part of the planning process. Now, a very important part of the planning, and this actually speaks to, this speaks to the part of whether we do it alone or whether we do it as a community, where you do it with other people, is the accountability piece. So in the planning, you want to go ahead and put in, and this is going to bleed into the structure conversation, but you want to start to put structures in place that will hold you accountable to the goals that you set. So oftentimes when we make a commitment, when we actually decide, okay, I really need to do something about it, the scariest thing to do is to put it out there. And the reason that it's so scary to put it out there is because it actually brings a higher level of accountability. Sure, you can say to yourself, yeah, I'm definitely going to make this transition. Something's got to give. I got to do something about this. And you can be in a research mode, in isolation. You can join a group in isolation and just look and watch and peek, right? But that doesn't bring any level of accountability. Once you actually participate in the group, once you actually post and ask questions, once you actually declare, this is what I'm doing, and this is the time frame with which I want to do it, once you reach out for help in that thing, you know, get yourself a mentor or even hire a coach. Once you do those things, you're putting your butt on the line. And that is where a lot of the fear comes in for a lot of people. A lot of times, the biggest thing that I hear when I talk to my clients, before they're my clients actually, is the fear of failure. And in the webinar that I do, the 5 Steps to Create Your Ideal Career, I talk about failure and how fear of failure can be one of the most paralyzing things, especially for us who are high performers, highly skilled, highly capable. God forbid we fail at something, right? But failure is just feedback. It's the mechanism, the GPS that allows us to recalculate our moves so that we can continue to move ourselves toward that ultimate goal, that ultimate success. So when you put yourself out there, that's a huge structure. And I think that's another major mistake that physicians make, that when they're trying to do that career transition, is they don't have an external accountability system. I was talking to a friend of mine who we were talking about ways to keep you accountable. And she said, well, you know, I have this three-prong approach. It's myself, God, and then one other person. And so I think that's valid. I mean, definitely, you know, having the internal motivation to hold yourself accountable, and definitely speaking to the higher power of your understanding, or whatever you call him or her, are two great places of accountability, and then having one external. But what's more powerful is to have more than one external accountability structure. So maybe it's a coach or a mentor, then maybe it's a friend. You know, I maintain a coach, but I also have 2 or 3 friends of mine who are in the similar space, business owners, entrepreneurs, highly trained professionals who I keep around me, that we held weekly accountability calls, so that whatever I declare I'm doing, and whatever I declare are my goals, I am held accountable to those, which means I have to take the actions consistent with making those goals happen. So that is another missing that sometimes happens with physicians, is that we rely on ourselves only to keep ourselves accountable, and that is not enough, ladies. It's not enough. So you want to put as one structure, you want to put in an external accountability system, and it could look like, and I'm not even talking about reminders on the phone, because that doesn't work either. I don't know how many of you have this experience or know this experience, but let's say you put a reminder on your phone to drink water every hour, and then the reminder goes off, and at first you're really good at it. You're like, okay, I'm sipping the water, but then eventually, you know, life happens and the alarm goes off and you're not near your water bottle, or you're in with a patient, or you're dealing with the kids, and you're like, oh, I'll get it next time, and you ignore. And then you ignore, and then you ignore, and you become desensitized to the reminder. So the external accountability calls you to the carpet, because that person says, no, this is not what you promised. This is, and not in a way that's derogatory or disrespectful or scolding, but in a way of, no, you are, how do I want to frame it? You're not living up to your full potential here, right? You're letting yourself off the hook. So you want a gentle but firm accountability partner, not someone that's going to beat you down. This is not medical school. This is not residency. The whole reason most of you all are thinking about transition is because our industry has beat us down. But at the same time, you still want a compassionate but firm and steady accountability partner, someone who really is going to call you to the carpet when you need to be called to the carpet in a loving way. So that's another very important structure. So, you know, we talk about, you know, strategies, your pathway, your map. You get your map in place. You don't always need to do that by yourself. In fact, it's actually more important that you put a map in place with someone else. You use someone else as a sounding board, or as a brainstorming partner for creating the map or the strategy, and then the structures that you put in place. Now, the whole point of putting structures in place is not only accountability. That's one reason for structures. But the other reason to put structures in place is to be able to break down your pathway into bite-sized pieces, into workable pieces. Structure creates workability in your life. Now, this is not just, I'm speaking about career transition. I'm speaking about creating the ideal career. I'm speaking about these things, but you can map this onto your life as well. Putting a structure in place helps you to break things down into workable parts. So if you know that your timeline is a year, for example, or 7 months, for six or 7 months, for example, then you can look at how do you break everything that you have to do down in bite-sized pieces so that you get it all done, but you get it all done in a way that doesn't feel overwhelming. Because when you make a list of all of the things that you have to do on the pathway to your ultimate goal, the list can just be overwhelming and feel like it's coming down on you. But if you look at it and you say, okay, I've got from now until, this is May, November. I think that's 6 months from now. And then you look at, okay, now I like to back into it. Okay, what do I need to have done by October in order to make this work? What do I need to have done by September, August, July, June, so on and so forth, so that you break it down into a process that is workable. Now, again, I often recommend doing this with a partner or with a coach, because we often overestimate our capacity as high performance people. And a lot of times we at least I can speak for myself and say, and some of the clients that I work with, that sometimes we give ourselves very aggressive timelines given everything in our lives, and we feel like it has to be done right now. So keeping it workable is creating a structure that is both aggressive but also workable, and being able to bounce that off someone, that is very, very valuable, whether, again, it be an accountability partner, a coach, or mentor, or even a family member, a spouse who has sort of an expertise and a say in that transition process. So once you get through this strategy, once you have a strategy and a structure in place, and you've made the declaration so that it's not all in here, it's not all in here and in here, it's out there in the world, then it's time for action. And you know, I think part of the preparation before you get to action is the mindset. And I was talking to a young mom doc earlier today who, you know, decided to come on board. We were talking about how in the process of transition, you can have the strategy, you can have the vision, right? You can have the blueprint, you can have the strategy, you can have the structure. But if you don't have your mind right, then you're gonna be the one that's getting in your own way the entire time. So part of the preparation is looking at where you have the potential to get in your own way. What are your own personality pitfalls? What are your own fears? What are your own roadblocks or internal roadblocks, stops, self-sabotage mechanisms? And you know, how is it that you can set up a structure to get you past that when you come up against those things? This is a time to be super honest with yourself, because of course, there are some of us who'll be like, oh no, I'm unstoppable. But if that's the case, it's great. But for most of us, myself included, there are internal conversations, limiting decisions that we're constantly having to work through in order to keep ourselves empowered and in action. So you want to prepare that in advance, because ultimately when you take action, there are going to be obstacles. There are going to be real roadblocks in the world. And if you come up against those obstacles and those roadblocks with the mindset of, oh, that means that's a sign that I shouldn't be doing this, then you've defeated yourself before you've even gotten past the first roadblock. And if you think about it, you know, there's the parable of the seed that is pushing through the ground, the plant that's pushing through the ground, through the soil, trying to reach the sunlight so it can then flourish and get what it needs to grow into this beautiful blossoming plant. And so this seed is pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And then the question comes, what if that seed stops just before it hits the surface? It breaks the surface. It fails to see the sunlight. It fails to reap all of the benefits of the sunlight, of the warmth that help it to grow and then continue to receive nutrients and blossom into its full potential. So that's the same thing here. You're going to encounter resistance. You're going to encounter roadblocks. You're going to encounter obstacles when you start taking action, but you have to mentally prepare yourself. And sometimes that means, again, getting an external accountability partner, keeping an external accountability partner, because once you get out once you start to transition, it's not all, roses and fluffy bunnies and, sunshine. It is work, and you have to continue to keep your mind right around that. No matter whether you're trying to create a new business or company or just transition careers in general, there are always obstacles. And so in this preparation stage, in this preparation phase, you want to be preparing your mind, you want to create a strategy or a map, and you want to put structures in place that help you win. Those are the three biggest things that that I recommend as a part of the process of preparation and change. So I said earlier that, I said throughout actually, that I recommend that, if you feel like you're having trouble doing this on your own, that you get a partner, an accountability partner, a mentor, a coach. And of course, I'm making myself available for those of you who are in this process of change and feeling stuck. I invite you to a free strategy call, and I'll put the link in so that if you want to do that, you can book the call. Now, I just, some of you know this because you're in multiple groups with me, but I just opened up a mastermind. I'm looking for 20 women who are ready, not thinking about, not contemplating, who are in that preparation stage, ready for action inside of their career transition. And I'm going to take them through I take you all through a 7-month transformation, career transformation process. And so the calendar's been filling up because I got an overwhelming response. And so if you want to have that free strategy call, if you're interested in learning more about that program or even any other coaching opportunities with me, you can book your free strategy call, and I'll put the link in the comments. Again, any questions? Now I know, hey Stacy, we getting you there, sis. We getting you there. We're getting you there. So any questions for anyone who's watching now, please post them in the comments. And, Melissa, you have any questions? Stacey, I know I'm going to be talking to you soon. But post your questions, post your comments, and, tell me what you thought of this training. What more do you want to see? What else do you want to hear? Because that's what I'm here for. So I'm going to pause for a little moment for anyone that might have comments or questions. And if I don't get any questions, then we will bid adieu because we are going into a long weekend, and I want you guys to go into this long weekend fully empowered. So any questions or comments? Yes, thank you, Melissa. Okay, so the question is, do you see people bridging to a temporary position usually or jumping right into a transition? So that really depends. That's a really good question. And it depends on what the current circumstance is. I have some of my mom docs who are not in super toxic environments, and so there's not a rush to jump into a bridge position. They can simply sort of buy their time out, and we prepare along the way. So for example, I might have a doc mom whose contract she knows is ending in 6 months or 9 months, and so she wants to use that time to prepare. And so she's not in a rush necessarily to transition out. But we work on, we stay in the job and we work on things as we work on them there. In some cases, I talk to doc moms who actually have already jumped out and have been not working. And so in that case, they want to get some immediate income in. And yes, that will be an appropriate time to jump into like a bridge position, a temporary bridge position, so that you get you get that income coming in, but a bridge position that is moving toward the ideal, or that is moving toward the space of the ideal, not jumping back into the fire, which can sometimes happen if you're not thinking about what the ideal bridge position would look like. So yeah, and then there are some people who are absolutely in toxic environments and need to get out. I do have one client where that's the case, and you know, she's put in a resignation. And so now what there is to do is to get that bridge job so that she still has that income coming in, and then she has the space. She's not worried about the money, so she has the space to create. And then sometimes the transition is an interesting one. It's not necessarily job to job. It may be department to department. So then, you know, people are biding their time to transition from one aspect of their career to another, but they're not having to do a bridge in order to do that. The bridge is enduring the current unworkability, unfortunately, of what they're currently in. So they're not leaving necessarily the company, but transitioning or creating something new within that practice or within that company. And in that case, I don't recommend jumping out into a bridge position, but doing what we can do to keep our mindset empowered and to make the days workable from a both mental and emotional and logistical standpoint, so that that time from one transition to another is the best that it can be. So does that answer the question? You know, I see all manner of transitions from the I've got to do something now, but I don't have to quit my job in order to do it right now, to I have to quit my job. Using side gigs as a bridge. Now that is, if the side gig is producing enough income, then that is a reasonable thing to do. If the side gig is not producing sufficient income and there's no backup, meaning you're the primary income earner, then it's not something that I would recommend. I typically, so I'm going to share personally my personal story about transition. So coming out of residency, this might answer your question, coming out of residency, I knew that my path would be different. So I knew that I was going to end up starting my own practice at some point, but I didn't lead with that. Well, no, I'll tell you, I did lead with that actually. I came out of residency, I jumped right into starting my own practice, and it was just me. I was young, I didn't have any kids, I wasn't married, and didn't do any type of side work, locums work, anything. And that business failed. That first business failed. So that's my failure story. And what I learned is that, number one, I didn't have the proper strategy, structure, or systems in place. That's one thing that I learned. And so I went and I started to do locums. That was my bridge. Now that bridge lasted for an extended amount of time for me, because I needed to go and learn marketing and learn business and learn everything that I needed to learn in order to run a successful business, which I did end up coming back just a couple of years later and doing. When I started my practice, though, I still continue to use my locums tenens income as a bridge, not necessarily relying on my practice as the bridge. So then fast forward 10 years into practice, which was just last year, when I decided to start this company, initially starting it as a side gig, but staying inside of my private practice and building it until it was sufficient enough to become a main gig. And so I don't recommend that you use your side gig as a bridge unless the income is sufficient to carry you. If the income is sufficient to carry you, by all means, go ahead and transition and then grow it pretty quickly. Now, if you're gonna jump into the side gig, if it's producing a good amount of income, enough to carry you over, if you have some backup support and you wanna just jump full in and then grow it, by all means, I do recommend that, as long as you have this is where I really truly recommend a coach, business coach, marketing coach, sales coach, whatever you need, so that you can grow it quickly and it can produce a good mainstream of income. That's how side gigs become main gigs. I'll tell you for myself, I did have to make a jump. I had to set a date for when this which was started out as a side gig, but I already had the strategy and the plan and the map in place for it to become a main gig. And I had planned it a year in advance. And so I already had the strategy in place so that I could, when it was time, lean on this, what began as a side gig, as my main gig. And now my clinical work has become my side gig. So does that answer your question, Melissa? And is there any follow-up question to that? Those are really, really good questions, actually. Excellent, excellent. Good, well, those are great questions. Okay, so here's another one. Do you tend to find people you work with have a direction they want to move towards, or mainly that they want to move away from clinical medicine? That's an awesome question as well. Okay, so I find, so it is an interesting phenomenon, actually. I find for some, initially they come to me thinking, okay, I definitely want to move away from clinical medicine, but it's because they're running away from a negative environment, when actually they still like clinical medicine, they just don't like the environment that they're in. So once we get that clarity in place, this is, you know, who we talked about earlier, getting that clarity of, well, what is it that you really love? What is it that you really want and really enjoy? Then we look at, is there a circumstance where you can have everything that you want and still stay in clinical medicine? And sometimes the answer is yes. And actually most of the time the answer is yes. We'll come to this conclusion that, yeah, I still do love seeing patients. I still do love, you know, but I want to be able to do it this way. And when we determine what that way is, and we can actually have them stay in clinical medicine. But then I do have some people who, they don't really know what they want. They just know they want out. And so then we have to actually do the work of what would be the ideal. And then, yes, there are those people who are very clear that they want to move out of clinical medicine. And sometimes they want to move in something that I'm terming clinical adjacent. And for that, by that, I mean like the coaching industry. And so the coaching industry, I would consider a consulting industry. That would be, so still working with patients in a way, but consulting with them in a different manner. And so that would be sort of clinical adjacent. And I do see a lot of docs having an interest in wanting to use that coaching model, which is very valid. It's a very nice model. I've been using it in my integrative medicine practice. I used it for years in my integrative medicine practice, and it makes such a difference. And I think that we want to empower our patients and really be able to connect with them, and that coaching model allows them to do that. But that also can be done in the context of clinical medicine. It's just the way you set up the clinical model in order to be able to do that. Does that answer your question? See, we've had a couple of other people join. So if you have any questions, if you have any comments for what you've heard so far, please jump in and comment. I'm here. Excuse me. You are so welcome, Melissa. I'm glad that I can answer those questions. Anything else? Any other questions popping into the mix? I'm going to spend a couple more minutes, and then I'm going to bid you all adieu. So I'm going to hang out for just a couple more minutes to see if any other questions pop in. And Melissa, thank you for your questions. Those were such great questions, especially in the context of, especially in the context of the process of change and preparation. Yes, yes. The Facebook groups are very helpful, and I think the most important part of them, being in a Facebook group, is to participate, is to ask the questions. You want to utilize the resources in which you are, and so that is why I created this group. And I think a lot of the docs who've come into this group are coming in from the non-clinical job hunters group, and I think that group is also an awesome group, because what I see is there are so many resources that people are posting. But why I created this group sort of as a complement to that group is so that people who are thinking about it, who are overwhelmed with all of these choices and possibilities, we can start to narrow down what it looks like, actually sift out all of that and what's helpful in doing that, so that you can get the most, you can actually streamline your search process and your transition process. So, and then of course, anybody who wants to work with me personally can do that as well. Awesome. Well, I am going to bid everyone adieu, wish you a wonderful, wonderful holiday weekend. Be safe out there, have lots of fun, do something good for yourself. And the thing that I want to leave you with is that knowing what you want is one thing, but preparation is key. And there are several components to preparation. The getting your mind right, getting yourself out of the way, making sure you have a map or a strategy, and then making sure you have an internal and an external structure. External structure being even more important. It's important because that you're the fish in water, to be able to bounce these things off of other people, and to know that what you want is possible. It's just about finding the pathways to getting there. So once again, just to let you know, I'm going to post in the comments the link to schedule a free strategy call with me if you should want to do so. If you're feeling stuck, if you feel like you're ready to make that change and you just need a little guidance, then the mastermind is still open, and when it closes, I'll let you know and start a wait list, just in case I need to start a second group, because like I said, the response has been big, and I'm very excited to take 20 women through this transformation. So I'll post the link there. You all have a great weekend, and I will post the next training is going to be centered around moving into action and staying in action, and then a little bit more on failure and feedback and and like keeping yourself empowered as you're taking action. That's the next training that we're gonna do. Okay, all right. Have a great weekend. Happy Friday. Namaste.